Start by taking a look at the day's headlines. Pulling out of the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. That's reportedly an idea being considered by the South Korean government as fears rise. Japan will release huge amounts of contaminated water into the ocean from its infamous Fukushima nuclear plant. As the US warns that troops from mainland China are amassing on the border, air travel to and from Hong Kong's international airport could be affected for a third straight day as protesters continue a tense standoff with police. Plus, more grim news for South Korea's job seekers. The data for July shows the overall unemployment rate was almost 4%, and that's the highest for the month in close to 2 decades. Our top story this morning, though, the chaotic protests at Hong Kong International Airport have cooled down somewhat today, with only a few demonstrators in the terminals. For now, at least, the airport was shut down periodically on Monday and Tuesday due to a massive rally over police aggression against the demonstrators. For now, though, flights are said to be operating normally, which is great news for travellers who become increasingly frustrated over the past couple of days. We have our Che Xiong on the line with the details. So, Xiong, just walk us through what we are hearing right now.
Well, Mark, according to reports, the airport resumed its normal operations early this morning. Currently, airport officials are rescheduling the timetable of flight arrivals and departures. Most of the protesters at the airport on Tuesday have left, and only a few remain. Now, although it's possible they might come back later. Now, on Tuesday, similar confrontations and scuffles between the protesters and police occurred, with police deploying tear gas to disperse the crowds. Local police say they detained 5 demonstrators at the airport on charges of battering police officers and carrying weapons. But as I mentioned, it's still unclear whether all flights will come and go as scheduled due to the possibility for more protests.
Right. Well, as we saw on Tuesday, the protesters mainly came in later in the day, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. So, aside from the status of the airport and the rallies, which are ongoing, of course, leaders from around the world are also growing increasingly concerned about these protests in Hong Kong. What are we hearing from them?
Well, Mark, on Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump took to Twitter saying that U.S. intelligence agencies had informed him that the Chinese government is moving troops to the border with Hong Kong. He went on to say that everyone should be calm and safe, in a clear reference to concerns that China may attempt to intervene with force. The UN Human Rights Chief also denounced the violence on Tuesday and called on Hong Kong to talk to its people. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, called for a prompt, independent, impartial investigation into alleged excessive force by police against the protesters. The EU has also expressed similar thoughts. The spokesperson for the European External Action Service, which is the EU's diplomatic arm, urged all sides to refrain from violence and calm down. The spokesperson also highlighted the need for all sides to come together for talks. That's all for now.
Well, thank you very much, Xiong, for that report on the current situation in Hong Kong. Let's hope it stays calm for the remainder of the day for those travellers stuck at the airport. Now, here in South Korea, the country's finance minister says the government will promptly start spending on social overhead capital in the second half of this year in a bid to try and revitalise the domestic economy, which is in the doldrums at the moment. In the ministerial meeting on Wednesday, Hong Nam-gi said the government will spend nearly $14 billion on public housing, roads and railroads. The government also plans to enhance productivity and safety in the construction sector by promoting research and development for smart construction technology. He also said more regulations will be eased to help the building sector. More bad news for job seekers as South Korea's unemployment rate reached 3.9% in July. This despite the creation of nearly 100,000 new jobs. Statistics Korea said on Wednesday the number of unemployed people last month was around 1.1 million. That's up almost 60,000 from a year ago. That figure also marks South Korea's highest level of unemployment for the month of July in 19 years. The jobless rate was especially high for people in their 20s and the over 60s. Statistics Korea said the reason the newly created jobs aren't leading to a fall in the unemployment rate is because of more people in their over 60s re-entering the workforce. Now, South Korea has vowed to actively seek ways to deal with Japan's planned discharge of water contaminated as a result of the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. Seoul's move comes as concerns rise that storage space will soon run out and Japanese officials will be left with no choice but to release at least some of the highly radioactive water into the ocean. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
The treatment of radioactive water stored in tanks in Fukushima has become the subject of intense international concern in recent months, including in South Korea, as reports say the Japanese government is considering releasing it into the Pacific Ocean. And now, South Korea, one of Japan's closest neighbors, says it will seek ways to deal with Tokyo's planned discharge.
We will work closely with institutions and countries in the Pacific Rim that will be affected and actively respond to any potential water discharge from the Fukushima plant.
Tokyo Electric Power Corporation, which manages the storage of the toxic water, says it will run out of space in 3 years. Greenpeace warned in a report earlier this year that South Korea will be among the nations most affected by any discharge. And with the IAEA General Conference to be held in Vienna in September, and the South Korea-China-Japan top regulators meetings on nuclear safety taking place in China in November, Seoul plans to raise the issue and consider other concrete actions. Asked about the possibility of South Korea boycotting the 2020 Tokyo Olympics over the matter, Seoul's Foreign Affairs Ministry did not provide a direct answer. Citing the same problem, a number of U.S. media outlets, including the Washington Post, have raised concerns over the safety of American athletes heading to Tokyo next summer. Since 2013, South Korea has blocked all seafood imports from 8 Japanese prefectures near Fukushima after it was found that contaminated water was leaking into the ocean. While Tokyo sought to challenge Seoul's decision by lodging a complaint at the World Trade Organization, the WTO in April ruled in Seoul's favor, saying the measures do not amount to unfair trade restrictions or arbitrary discrimination. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The South Korean government is due to make a pre-announcement of the revision to the public notice on trade of strategic items in a move to remove Japan from its own whitelist of trusted trade partners. Seoul's Trade Ministry says the pre-announcement will be posted online on Wednesday and it will receive public opinions on the revision for 20 days. The revision aims to downgrade Japan's fast-track status 1 notch and establish a new classification in Seoul's export system. With the revision, the process for South Korean companies importing strategic materials and products from Japan will require more documents and may take as much as over 2 weeks rather than the current 5 days. A senior American diplomat has reiterated that Washington will continue to maintain tough sanctions on North Korea and has expressed concerns over the regime's repeated missile launches. The official also said the US will consult closely with its partners and allies in the Asia-Pacific region when it comes to the issue of deploying intermediate-range missiles throughout this part of the world. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
U.S. State Department Undersecretary for Arms Control and International Security Affairs Andrea Thompson has reaffirmed Washington will continue to apply international sanctions on North Korea. Thompson, who was visiting New Zealand, held a conference call with reporters on Tuesday in which she expressed U.S. concerns about the North's continued missile launches. This is in contrast to President Trump's response to the regime's 5 rounds of weapons tests since July 25th. He brushed them off as, quote, very standard. Thompson also emphasized that Washington will keep working with its partners and allies as it continues to enforce UN Security Council resolutions. She also said the Trump administration will stay engaged with the regime, adding she's confident working-level discussions will resume soon. On the issue of deploying intermediate-range missiles to Asia, Thompson said the decision will be made jointly with U.S. allies in the region. She stressed that such a decision will never be made unilaterally by Washington. She also said any missile deployment would be for defensive purposes, despite China's fierce opposition. The U.S. has said it plans to deploy such weapons in the Asia-Pacific following its withdrawal from the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, a move Beijing has vowed to respond to. Kim Hyun-sun, Arirang News.
Now, the 1400th weekly Wednesday rally near the Japanese embassy in South Korea will be held in Seoul today. It falls on August 14th, which was designated by the Korean government as the International Memorial Day for Comfort Women last year, as well as being one day before Korea's National Liberation Day, which is a national holiday here. The rally has been held every Wednesday for 27 years, calling on Tokyo to offer an official and sincere apology and pay appropriate compensation to the Korean victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery. These victims are commonly known as comfort women. This week's rally is being held under the theme of backing the victims' voices and urging the Japanese government to hear them. Rallies are scheduled in 34 cities in 10 countries, including the UK, New Zealand, the Philippines, Taiwan and Japan, to show global solidarity. Now, 100 South Korean students made a special trip to China last month to mark the 100th anniversary of the establishment of Korea's Provisional Government. In the first of our special two-part series of reports, we are going to take a look at the students' 10-day tour around the various sites that were really the tip of the spear to resisting Japan's brutal colonial rule of Korea. Our Lee Ji-won files this report.
In this quiet corner of Chungcheong in China's southwest, a crowd of students excitedly walk into the narrow alleys. Their destination is the site of the Korean Provisional Government during Japan's colonial rule of Korea from 1910 to 1945. Chungcheong is where the Provisional Government stayed for the last 5 years until Korea was liberated at the end of World War II. The Provisional Government was established in 1919, but they had to hide first from the Japanese soldiers and later also from the bombs of wartime, so their traces are hard to find. But among all the sites, this one is the most well-preserved. 100 young leaders from Korea have come here to see where the modern foundation of their country was established, something they find inspiring and overwhelming.
Seeing the chairs, the office, and the beds our ancestors used while working for our independence, I felt a mix of feelings. They fought so hard for our country despite the tough environment. It's because of them that we are where we are today.
In celebration of the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the Provisional Government, South Korea's Foreign Affairs Ministry organized this trip so that the young leaders of Korea can follow the footsteps of their ancestors. Starting from Chungcheong, the students went in reverse order to 6 Chinese cities that hosted the Provisional Government. These famous places include the city of Jiaxing, which was the refuge of the Provisional Government's leader Kim Gu. Also the memorial halls and memorial parks of the fallen heroes.
It's very different from what I read in books, and seeing these historical sites in reverse order showed us what unfavorable environment and situation our ancestors first started in.
Now, in between cities, the students were also entertained with various cultural performances and talks that helped them better understand the history. One of them was a talk with the families of the independence fighters. Lee So-sim, daughter of Lee-dal, who participated in combat against Japan, fought very hard for the restoration of the Chungcheong complex. And during her talk to the students, she emphasized that history must not be taken for granted.
Korea has prospered like it has thanks to the sacrifices of the Provisional Government. But it seems like not many remember the history. For Korea to become a greater country, we must not forget the blood shed by those activists. That is what I wanted to share with the students today.
이지원, 아리랑 뉴스.
Now, in some local news, the Seoul Metropolitan Government will build an extra 266 libraries across the capital by 2025 to provide citizens with easier access to information. In particular, the city says it's focusing on 5 new municipal libraries which will serve as regional branches of the Seoul Metropolitan Library. Once complete, Seoul will be home to around 1,400 libraries, raising the number of library books per citizen to 2.4 from last year's 1.4. Officials added the expansion plan will mean all Seoul residents will live within 10 minutes walk from a public library. US President Donald Trump says he's delaying new China tariffs for the Christmas season in case some of the tariffs would have an impact on American consumers. The new 30% tariffs on China were initially expected to take force on September 1st, but that's not going to happen now. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Kim Dami. So Dami, tell us more about what was quite a surprise U-turn.
Right, Mark. The U.S. says it's delaying imposing tariffs on some Chinese-made goods until December 15th because of health, safety, national security, and other factors. That's according to the Trump administration on Tuesday. The list of products includes mobile phones, computer monitors, laptops, video game consoles, and certain footwear and clothing. But other items facing a 10% tariff will be enforced as planned from September 1st. President Trump told reporters on Tuesday that the delay is a part of his efforts to avoid hitting U.S. shoppers this Christmas. Analysts say the decision also reflects U.S. attempts to calm financial markets and to expand a space for talks with China while considering impact on the U.S. economy after the additional tariffs take force. The U.S. Trade Representative's announcement on Tuesday, in fact, came right after China's Ministry of Commerce revealed the two countries resumed talks over the phone. The two sides agreed to hold another phone conversation in 2 weeks. One patrol officer has died and 2 others injured after a shootout on a California highway. An officer made a traffic stop of a pickup truck on Riverside Highway at around 5:37 p.m. on Tuesday local time. While waiting for a tow truck to arrive, the pickup driver, the suspect, entered the vehicle and began firing a rifle at the officer. The officer later died of his injuries. The suspect also died during a resulting shooting spree with police. His motive for shooting the officer is still unknown.
Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we take a look at information that we hope is useful for your daily life. Now, over the last few months, gaming addiction has been a hot topic of debate all over the world after the WHO classified it as a mental disorder. Here in Korea, where online gaming is a popular pastime, not just for kids and teenagers, but also adults as well, gaming addiction has already been recognized as a growing problem. I'm glad to say our Oh Soo-young joins us to describe the various ways we can prevent or curb gaming addiction here in South Korea. So Soo-young, first let's start by asking you, where do we draw the line between just enjoying online games to actually being addicted to them?
Well, there are various guidelines out there, differs by country, as you can imagine. But well, I think we go by the WHO standards now, and that includes an inability to control unhealthy gaming habits, which seriously impact your personal and professional life. South Korean health professionals have actually been using a manual for mental disorders developed by the American Psychiatric Association, and it lists the following as key symptoms, which are preoccupation with gaming, withdrawal symptoms such as feeling sadness, anxiety or irritability when you're unable to play online games, the inability to control yourself, obviously, as well as giving up other activities and even deceiving your family members or close people to you about the amount of time you actually spend on gaming. And this could lead to risking or jeopardizing your responsibilities or even your relationships due to your excessive gaming. So if 5 or more of these symptoms occur within a year, then you are considered addicted.
Okay, so those are the signs to look out for. In these days as well, it's so easy. You get bored of one game and you just search through all the other games on your phone and you can start playing another game, get bored of that and then go to another game. So it's not like the old days where you had to stick with the same game until your parents could buy you a new one. But is it a situation where you are predisposed to gaming addiction, or is it something that anyone can really develop?
Well, there is a huge debate over that question. The opinions are obviously very divided. But what mental health professionals say is that, they say what's for certain is that, like any other substance or behavioral addiction, gaming addictions are pretty much the same. They tend to develop when you become dependent on something. And naturally, you are more inclined to develop an addiction or become growingly dependent or indulge in something excessively once you start, if you are lacking in judgment or have a weak sense of self-control. So that is why teenagers and children are more susceptible to this, along with maybe university students or young adults who have moved out of their homes for the first time.
It's like developing a drinking problem. When you're alone and feeling bored and you find yourself in a better mood after gaming, it's easier to form unhealthy habits. We can't say gaming directly causes addiction, but games that have a speculative nature in particular make it easier to overly indulge. So this could cause problems for those who are psychologically unstable or children and teenagers without proper guidance or supervision.
Yeah, myself as a father of 2 young boys, I really see this as a big problem. We have a rule in our house where we limit it to 1 hour per week. But some other parents we speak to, they just let their children play with the smartphone and they're on it for hours on end. So potentially I could see this problem getting even worse. Let's hope not. But if you are concerned that you may have developed a gaming addiction or someone you know, what are the ways that you can potentially overcome it?
Well, like you do with your children, if you can contain it, if you haven't fully developed it yet, then controlling the time you spend on gaming is very important. But then if you feel like you have developed very unhealthy habits, then the first step should be consulting a healthcare professional. And you can do this at your local hospital, or you can check out one of the specialized clinics which are available throughout the country, as you can see on the map. And as for teenagers, the government is running camps for gaming and smartphone addictions, a camp which I actually introduced in one of my reports this week. You can probably see in the footage coming up. And
so did the people there say that they broke their gaming addiction through a program like this?
Well, they're trying, and it's so hard to break because it's been developed over the months, weeks and weeks and months and months. So healthcare professionals actually say it takes just as long to get over their addiction as well. So that's obviously very tricky for them. And the program itself, it goes up to 4 weeks, so perhaps it's not really enough, but it is a very good start though. It's in the middle of nowhere really, where they're very far away from any kind of internet connection. So it's located in Muju County, Jeollanam-do province. So as you can see, there are various options here available in South Korea, but the critical factors for recovery is setting time limits, as you do with your children, and also trying to regain control over your urges. But this, you really need a very strong support network.
It takes time to develop an addiction, and it takes just as much time to recover. Recovery takes a repeated effort, so you need someone to hold your hand and encourage you. That's why we need support from loved ones, therapeutic activities, and psychological supports, as well as help on managing time and gaining self-awareness.
Well, we know that battling any addiction is never easy, and gaming addiction is right up there, unfortunately, in this modern world we live in. But it's good to know there are health professionals out there in centres where people can go to if they really think they have a big problem. And if you also want more immediate support, go and see a family member or make sure they try and restrict your time on games. Absolutely. As always, Soo-young, we appreciate you coming in, bringing the really hard-hitting topics to us, and we hope to see you again next time.
Right, always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Good morning. It's another steamy day with most of South Korea under heat wave warnings. Highs in most regions will hover around 35 degrees Celsius this afternoon. So we'll need to find a cool and air-conditioned place this afternoon. It's going to be as hot or even hotter than yesterday. And there is a chance of spreading rain in western parts of the country, so be sure to have an umbrella handy. Then from this evening, eastern regions will see heavy rain clouds moving into the country due to the indirect effect of Typhoon Kosa. Japan is on high alert as the storm is expected to make landfall near the city of Hiroshima from today, and conditions will worsen across southern Japan from Wednesday into Thursday. So Korea's easternmost islands of Dokdo and Ulleungdo and the east coast will see heavy showers into Thursday evening, and the weather agency could even issue typhoon advisory for the east coast. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. Our next newscast is at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.
Sensing Korea's passion through K-pop. Acquiring Korean culture while